After losing the love of his life in a freak lawn mowing accident, a brilliant scientist named Jeffrey Franken decides to Frankenstein his fiancée using the best body parts from a whole bunch of hookers, hence the name Frankenhooker. The 80s and 90s was the golden age of low-budget horror films with ridiculous plots. In the era before streaming movies, when there weren't 7,000 options of places to watch movies, you had to go to the video store and you hoped that you picked a good one. Had I ever seen a movie called Frankenhooker on the shelf, I would have had to rent it based on title alone. Frank Henenlotter directed the movie, and he's most well known for the Basket Case films, but to me, this is his defining film, and I always found it funny how close his name is to the title of the movie. And I love the absurdity of the Jeffrey Franken character brought to screen by James Lorinz. He is a high-strung, angry loser who also happens to be an absolute scientific genius. He has a lot of crazy ideas, but he has the smarts and the mechanical ability to pull them off. This is essentially a retelling, if in a slightly twisted way, of the Bride of Frankenstein. Now, Franken is constantly mumbling under his breath and talking to himself, and that's my favorite part of the film. He does it so the audience knows what he's thinking. He's a little unhinged and grief-stricken, but he's mostly a good person, even if he's willing to do some less than ethical things to bring the love of his life back from the dead. Now, no matter how absurd you think Frankenhooker is, I can promise you it's more absurd. The special effects are incredible. Everything is done practically, and I assume a lot of the practical effects took inspiration from John Carpenter's The Thing. As expected, the special effects aren't nearly as good as those in The Thing, but they are a lot funnier. The mad scientist lab inside Franken's garage is so well done. It looks like something a crazy person could actually build. And the streets and seedy underbelly of New York City, it's just sleazy enough to be believable. The sets are way better than they need to be. For a goofy Frankenstein ripoff, everything is really well done. James Lorenz's mad scientist is up there as my favorite of all time, alongside the reanimator, Jeffrey Combs. I truly find this movie hilarious, even if a lot of the jokes probably wouldn't work if they were written today. There is a particularly over-the-top scene inside of a sleazy motel that is very R-rated, but features some of the best, funniest, and absolutely fakest-looking special effects in the film. The movie is just nuts. An example being the scene where Franken brings home a car full of hooker body parts. So many that he can't even shut his trunk. Now, these are supposed to be real human body parts, but they are clearly just mannequin limbs. There's never a risk that the cops are going to get involved, even though he's doing nothing to cover his tracks. It just isn't that kind of movie. Now, while the whole point of the film is for him to rebuild his fiancée, I actually found the parts without the titular Frankenhooker to be the best parts of the film. The interaction between Franken and his mother, or Franken and the pimp, or interacting with the hookers in the hotel room, those are the funniest parts to me. Now, I guess this is a horror film, but there's nothing scary about it. It's closer to a slapstick comedy than anything resembling horror. It's worth watching for James Lorenz's performance alone, and all of the over-the-top and never predictable special effects. It is in the running for one of my all-time favorite horror comedy films. Brains with eyes, crawling through legs dressed as a doctor. Danny DeVito doppelgangers, drilling a hole in your own head. Girls making this face, picking out the perfect leg.